Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming to this edition of the Adams State Faculty Lecture Series for Fall 2023. I'm not Jess Gagliardi. He is jet-setting around or something, I don't know exactly, but he's not able to make it, so he asked me to stand in for him tonight. I'm Mike Clifford, and tonight, well, first, before I talk about tonight, let me talk about next week. Come on back Thursday night, and Professor Bill Tite of art will be speaking, so that should be fun too. But this evening's event is presented by Dr. Michelle Mann and Dr. Curtis Garcia from the School of Education. Michelle Mann received her bachelor's degree from Furman University in biology with science teacher licensure. She completed a Master of Arts degree in biology with an emphasis in education from the University of South Florida. Michelle earned her PhD in STEM education from the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Curtis Garcia is a San Luis Valley native who earned his bachelor's degree from Yale University, then returned home to work as an educator. He holds a Master of Arts degree in educational leadership from Adams State and a PhD in educational leadership research and policy from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. So please help me in welcoming Drs. Mann and Garcia.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to talk tonight about the mentoring program that we've been doing. We're on our third year of it, and with lessons that we have learned along the way. Of course, it's still going on. So as y'all know, we're in a major teacher crisis. There's 44% of the teachers quit teaching in the first 5 years. The U.S. demand for teachers will outpace its supply by more than 100,000 by 2025. The average growth rate for elementary teachers from 2020 to 2030 is 7%. The average growth rate for secondary teachers from 2020 to 2030 is 8%. Teachers quit their jobs for a variety of reasons, such as lack of support, poor pay, and poor working conditions. Of course, part of the solution is to provide the system with more teachers coming out of the universities. And as I think everybody in here is aware, we are working very hard at Adams to do that. However, it's also important for us to retain the teachers that we have in the field. And that will, of course, help the crisis too. One of the ways to do that is added support for novice teachers for them to receive. So, hence is mentoring. So we applied when the state offered the application to apply to offer the mentor endorsement at Adams. And then the state had grants that we could apply for. And we applied for our Colorado Department of Higher Education for a grant to run the mentoring program. We received our first grant in the summer of 2021. The grant covered most of the tuition for the participants, a stipend for the participants, and books for the courses. And the participants, as part of to earn their mentor endorsement, took a seminar and internship for 2 semesters. So they finished with a total of 12 credits. We chose to only work the first year with the Center School District. So a little bit about the background of the Center, the school district. The total student population is 607, preschool through 12th grade. 91% of the student body is Hispanic or Latino. 87% of the students qualify for free or reduced lunch. 34% of the students are identified as English language learners. And the significant population of immigrant, migrant students and families. There are 47 licensed teachers that teach at Center. So our first cohort was 11 teachers total. which included 5 elementary teachers, 3 secondary teachers, 2 in English, and 1 in science, 1 special ed teacher, 1 culturally, linguistically diverse teacher, and 1 alternative high school teacher. All teachers worked at the school district, and they had various leadership roles. And the teachers were identified and selected or volunteered, so to say, by the superintendent to participate in that program. So we worked with the superintendent and as teachers. Of course, not everybody accepted.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our design of the program and why we chose to design it the way we did. But before I address the information on the slide, I just want to clarify that our choice to only focus on Center School District for the first year of the grant was strategic. We've had a multi-year partnership with Center School District now, I think going on 6 years. And it's because of the demographic profile and the context that you all saw that we find value in our work of future teacher training and having our students serve and practice in a school like Center. And it's been a really productive partnership in which we've both kind of contributed things. So the superintendent at the district, Carrie Zimmerman, initially offered to even help transport students, because that's always a major concern, right? Is Center is not very close, and as you all know, many of our students have challenges related to transportation. Either they don't have a car, they can't afford the gas, so the district would send buses once a week to pick up our students, have them spend the day or do their field service hours in Center, and then return them to the university. And it was through that strategic partnership that we really started to understand and appreciate the value of mentor training and being able to give our students access to mentors who weren't just volunteering to have one of our students in their room, but were actually undergoing some training and building a skill set that would allow them to give really high quality feedback to our students, coach our students, and ultimately groom them into effective teachers. And all of that is just some context as well, because when it came for us, time for us to design the program, we wanted to be very intentional about it not just being solely based on coursework or theory. You know, we wanted it to have that very practical element where the mentors were getting to have lots of experience in practicing the new skills, gaining feedback from us and from peers, and developing their own effectiveness as mentors that way. So we designed it as a 1-year program. It's 12 credit hours that we made degree eligible so that these folks who are going through the program had the opportunity, if they so choose, to apply those credits towards a full master's degree. And we just split it up over the 2 semesters of the academic year so that each semester they're taking 1 seminar with us, which we co-teach, and then they're completing a practicum experience in the field where they are mentoring and coaching a beginning teacher. Those folks can either be our students serving in the schools, they can be an alternative teacher candidate that the district has hired, or they could even be a beginning teacher who is undergoing induction into the district. And so we held regular biweekly seminars at the school district site. So Michelle and I went there every other Friday. And at first we were uncertain whether we were going to get engagement from folks if we asked for them to be face-to-face so often. But that turned out to be a happy finding that we'll talk about later. So for the first half of the program, our focus of the curriculum was really to expose them to coaching and the use of coaching to provide effective feedback to teachers. And we chose 2 models. One is the cognitive coaching model, which was developed by Costa and Garmston. It's being widely used across the United States and is growing in its popularity and use within schools. And then the other model we chose was instructional coaching. Jim Knight has developed that, and it's another popular model that you see in the world of K-12 education. And for the second half of their experience, we kind of opened up the curriculum to focus on how to really not just develop skills, but how to start embedding mentoring and coaching within broader systems of school. So our goal in this was not to only train high quality mentors and coaches, but to help shape them into leaders that could inform their systems in ways that would help embed high quality coaching and mentoring to support all teachers in their school. And then we had the support of our faculty, of course, which included direct observation of the mentors and coaches as they were practicing in the field, and support on any issues that they had unique to their mentor role. Okay, so this is a picture of just our second year cohort. We told you about the first year where we focused on center, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. But as we ran the grant for a second year, we started to hear more demand from other schools in the region. And so we recruited from multiple districts in the San Luis Valley. And we happily were able to serve even more areas than just center in that second year. So this is a list of our second cohort. We had 16 teachers total from 6 different districts across the valley. You can see the breakdown there of their areas, and then the various school districts that they came from. And this was an interesting shift in the work, because this is where we started to see more demand and applications coming through than there were slots to fill. So we had to do a little bit of vetting around their experience levels and just the needs in order to land on our cohort. But we learned that they were learning about the program from information that was starting to be distributed throughout the districts and word of mouth. So we were starting to gain some popularity there. All right. I brought some fun infographics here from the Institute of Educational Sciences, just to talk a little bit about what we're even saying when we talk about instructional coaching. So for those who aren't familiar with the model, it's a job-embedded professional learning model that focuses on both the content and practice of the teacher. So traditional professional development sometimes looks like teachers all sitting in a room together, listening to a presenter, and as the expert, telling the teachers, here's what you need to do to be a better teacher. Well, coaching is very different in that it involves professional learning where the teacher is engaged directly in their day-to-day work in the classroom, and it's the role of a coach to observe them in their practice and to prompt reflection and feedback through skilled questioning techniques and skills in facilitating a coaching conversation. And that's precisely what we were aiming to build with our cohort that was coming through the program as they developed those skills. I know there's a lot of text here, but it's just to highlight a few other things about instructional coaching. It can take many forms. So it can be observational, where a coach is going in and not evaluating the teacher's performance, but simply observing what is it that they are doing in the classroom, what is it that students are doing, and collecting that data to guide a coaching conversation. So after a coach has observed a teacher's lesson, they'll share back some data with the educator, and typically they'll have developed some prompts or questions that are aimed at helping that educator reflect on their own practice and start to gain some agency in solving any challenges that arose during the lesson and thinking through how they can improve and make that lesson better in the future. Another form that coaching can take is side-by-side coaching. And this is where coaches engage in planning alongside a teacher. So even before a lesson is taught, a coach can be already kind of prompting some reflection as the teacher is planning a lesson, again with the goal of helping them maximize their effectiveness and quality of that lesson through the reflection and through the conversation. The practice that our cohort folks went through involved both of those things. We tried to give them experiences both in observational coaching and data collection, as well as some side-by-side support, which is often referred to as consulting as well within the coaching world. And then we have this last piece that we embedded, and that's a really big part of coaching, which is called the impact cycle. And this is just kind of the model within coaching that helps prompt continuous growth and development. So it starts first with teachers having a sense of a goal that they have for a lesson or for a part of their practice. And the coach's job is to help them clarify that goal and think about how they're going to implement their practice and measure that goal as they move forward. Then, once the teacher has started planning and implementing a lesson, the coach can help by providing consulting support, suggesting ideas for different strategies that the teachers can use. But again, they're continuously asking questions to prompt reflection and to get the teacher to try to modify their practice in different ways to maximize their effectiveness. During that phase, there could be recording of a lesson that takes place so that there's data that the teacher and the coach can reflect on together, or it can just be happening in real time where the observation is taking place. And then it's through the coaching conversation that comes after an observation that a teacher starts to reflect on their practice and think about next steps for moving forward. And the data just continues to drive the conversation and the growth that the teacher experiences through the model moving forward. So within this, the teacher's role is to identify those learning goals, provide some data either through their practice or through their own assessment of students, and invite that feedback from the coach. And this is a really key point here, is one of the things that makes coaching successful and that's necessary is it requires the regular engagement between the teacher and the coach. So we really pushed, and this was a challenge we found with school schedules and things, but we really pushed the folks in our cohort to really schedule times, regular times to meet with their mentees and hold true to those times so that those conversations were happening regularly and there was a sustained and consistent coaching that was happening. A coach's role is to recruit teachers, gather and analyze the data, assist in creating those goals. They really listen and ask questions based on what they're hearing the teacher reflecting on. So many coaches or mentors think when they first come into the program that their job is to consult or tell a teacher, hey, you did this wrong, here's something that you should do differently or make it better. And good coaching is actually the opposite of that. Good coaching is about listening and using whatever it is that a teacher is reflecting on and saying to drive that conversation deeper and that reflection deeper. And then building leadership and administrators have a really important role to play in providing access to the time and resources that both the mentors and the coaches need to be engaging in this work. So that could include things like release time for coaches who are often full-time teachers themselves to be able to go and observe a peer. It could be, support with ensuring that whatever time they've scheduled for their meetings is not being interrupted, that they're able to have that regularity and consistency. And as we've learned in other years, starting to build systems within the school so that coaching and mentoring become a regular part of that culture.
So we wanted to explore looking at the impact of mentoring on teacher efficacy. So teacher efficacy is a judgment of a teacher's own capabilities that bring about desired outcomes in student engagement and learning, even among students who may be difficult or unmotivated. So the original research on self-efficacy was Bandura, but we're going to build on that. So high levels of efficacy have been found to be associated with improved outcomes in student achievement, motivation, greater levels of planning and organization, increased willingness to experiment with new methods to meet needs of students, and higher levels of job satisfaction and new teacher retention. So here's the retention piece that we're looking for. So we know that mentoring increases self-efficacy of the new teachers. And there's research that supports that it increases retention, but we wanted to also look at the effect of the mentoring training on the actual mentor. So we came up with some research questions. In what ways, if any, does serving as a mentor or coach of a developing teacher impact the self-efficacy and related outcomes of the mentor and coach or coach? What roles can mentors and coaches play in creating systems of support for developing teachers? And what impact does structured mentoring and coaching have on the self-efficacy and related outcomes of developing teachers?
Okay. So just want to reiterate the point that where we saw the gap in the research was that so much of the outcomes that had been observed on mentoring and coaching were focused on the developing teacher mentee, but we saw potential based on some of the retention findings that there could also be some outcomes worth noting for the mentors themselves, particularly if they were veteran teachers who were looking for things like leadership opportunities or ways to inform systems. And so that's what kind of drove the design of our research questions. And to get we had multiple, we've used multiple data collection strategies. So the first one we identified was a self-efficacy scale, which we adopted from Shannon Moran and Woolfolk out of their research that they did in teacher self-efficacy in 2001. It's a pretty widely used scale, and it just includes items that look at teachers' perceptions of their own effectiveness, perceptions of their ability to impact the learning of their students, perceptions of their impact on systems. And so it's got a lot of really great items that we were able to track throughout the experience. Because we were doing regular seminars and engaging regularly with our mentors, we also used reflection journals as a data source. We conducted whole group observations during our seminars. And we also individually met with each member of the cohort, and through those observations and interviews recorded other data. And then we had a mentor survey that we designed just to gauge additional data on their experience throughout the seminar and the practicum. And then our final data collection method was through document analysis. So as we started to look at the systems pieces, especially looking at what is it that districts and schools were doing differently in terms of policies, practices that were documented and shared with teachers, that showed any change in how they were approaching this model.
It's yours.
Is this me? Okay.
Yeah.
So we wanted to share just a few of the findings that we collected, and these came from that first year. So you can see here just some of the items on the self-efficacy survey, and we did a pre-post survey. Keep in mind it's a small n size that we're working with, so we're acknowledging that. But nonetheless, we want to be able to just see, is there any detectable change? And these are some items where we did see some change that caught our attention. So on the question that asks how much can you do to get through to the most difficult students, we saw an increase in the average scores pre to post. Same for how much can you do to help your students think critically? How much can you do to control disruptive behavior in the classroom? How much can you do to motivate students who show low interest in schoolwork? How much can you gauge student comprehension of what you've taught? And how much can you do to improve the understanding of a student who is failing? So we continue to track this data through additional cohorts of students to look to see if there's repetitive patterns. But one thing that we found interesting just in these initial findings is that if you look at some of the skills that would be involved in some of those pieces, you can start to see relationships between the work of coaching and what it means to support a developing teacher or a peer, and then how that could translate or transfer to their effectiveness as a teacher and how they're facilitating learning in the classroom for their students.
So, as we said, we had multiple evaluation instruments we used. Another one of the items on the evaluation was, I enjoy teaching. Now, these numbers don't look great. In fact, I do realize these are the same numbers. But, well, I have a biology degree, not chemistry. So we're not as numeric. But I also can say when they took the pretest was early, of course, in the beginning of the year. And when they took the post-test was the end of April, beginning of May. And how do teachers feel at the end of April, beginning of May? they're sitting right there in the middle of all that standardized testing and all the craziness of the end of the year. So there's much literature to say this is actually, that it's the same is actually a good thing. And of course, the second cohort had a little bit more of a increase in how much they enjoy teaching. So candidates also drew connections between what they learned in the program and being a better teacher, suggesting that their self-efficacy also increased as a result of participating in the program. We had comments. Again, they had journals, and we also had individual interviews and whole group to get that we took all the comments from. But I've learned a lot of techniques that have helped me personally and professionally. Learning about myself as much as learning about this class. I have definitely increased my confidence as a teacher. We want to retain those teachers that are in the classroom. So, showing some good results with that.
So for these next few slides, we're also going to share now some of our qualitative data that is starting to reveal some themes that we're finding very interesting and that help reinforce our kind of hypothesis that mentoring and coaching can be significant for improving a teacher's self-efficacy, validating their own perceptions of their practice, and even sense of self-worth. So we'll just read a couple of these aloud just so you can hear the words of the people that are reflecting on their experiences. So this one down here says, I have loved it and hated it and been excited about it and have felt overwhelmed by it and felt unworthy of it and felt empowered by it and felt renewed by it. I have felt listened to and validated and respected. I have been able to begin to move forward from some fairly difficult feelings and have been able to see others' perspectives, and most importantly of all, I feel hopeful because of it. So this quote was actually shared in one of our I believe, live sessions from a teacher who had really started to feel some burnout and was questioning whether they even wanted to be in the profession anymore. And we just thought it was really powerful through their reflection that the experience of listening and gaining those skills and supporting a developing teacher as a mentor and a coach kind of caused some perspectives to shift in ways that we felt were really powerful for their own sense of self-worth and retention in the role that they had chosen.
So another quote, being a mentor is a huge responsibility, as the success of the mentor-mentee relationship could ultimately determine whether or not the mentee continues in the teaching field. And I guess it can also determine whether or not the mentor continues, depending on their experience. So again, you see the renewed, and that the mentors are starting to see that their relationship with their mentee and working with them is also a learning experience for them, not only for the mentee.
I feel more excited about my future as a teacher, as a veteran teacher. It is often difficult to find joy in teaching and not feel weighed down. I feel like a better teacher who is able to question and listen better. I feel like I am also a better mentor for the same reasons. So again, we start to see some of the skills that are embedded within the training coming through in their reflections of their work as a teacher, and we find that very interesting. The other point I wanted to make about this is that oftentimes teachers who have been in the field for a while are looking for new opportunities to grow, but not all of them may aspire to leaving the classroom or doing something like becoming a principal. And so this suggests to us that mentoring and coaching may provide one way for a teacher to feel that sense of renewal or growth without necessarily having to leave the classroom that they love and that they've grown accustomed to.
So this semester has been really eye-opening for me. It helped me connect more with myself, my students, my mentee, and even my husband and kids. I've reflected a lot more on my practice than I've done in years, and I've tried to use the coaching tools we've learned as much as I can. And, well, we found also that the mentors don't exactly finish cooking after 1 year of the program. that it takes a while. It takes a lot of reflection. We're going to talk more on that as we move through. But I felt like that kind of suggested that they're still growing.
So this first quote kind of highlights another thing we found interesting. It says, "What struck me the most about this work and this newly found knowledge is that many of the principles and ideas can be applied to my personal life and relationships. This experience has empowered me to be able to make some behavioral changes in my own life that have made me happier and healthier. In the end, I really feel like this type of coaching could be applied to many fields of work and life outside of education." So one of the nirvanas we all have as teachers and people in education is if we can help our students be able to transfer whatever they're learning in one setting and use it in another setting. And we have, this is just one of many quotes that came through about that transferability of the skills, the listening skills, the support and mentoring skills that they not only found themselves using during their work, but were starting to transfer and use within their own personal lives. And then the second quote says, "Mentoring has a totally different definition this year than it has in the past. I thought a mentor's job was to give information to their mentee to make them successful. This is somewhat true, but it is my job to question the mentee to figure out what they need to change or add." So the perspective shift there in what it is that a mentor actually does and what makes an effective mentor was something we, again, are seeing as a theme coming through some of this data.
And on that same theme, I learned that mentoring is not just about consulting, but about helping others figure out problems for themselves with little bit of guidance. I learned not to be quick with jumping in, but sitting on the sidelines, guided when needed. And the second one, if only I had been taught to plan, reflect this way from the beginning, I can imagine how different my teaching would have been.
So we're going to shift now from sharing some of that, the findings and the data, to talking about, okay, how has this work evolved through the multiple years that we've done it? So after our initial year with Center, there were 2 teachers in that cohort that were so motivated and so driven that they decided to write a grant for the school district to create a mentoring and coaching system district-wide. And it's a 2 or 3 year grant. I think it was a 2-year grant.
2-year.
And as they were writing it, they said, "Oh, but we don't want to lose our relationship with Adams State. Can you all help us and support us in continuing to grow this system so that we can expand it to the whole district?" And so that led us to start to think about, okay, well, a part of our goal was to think about how our teachers, is this work going to help teachers see themselves as leaders and be able to gain some agency to inform systems change? And so as that actually evolved, we came up with some additional focus areas here, which is 1, how can structured mentoring or coaching support the district in addressing their strategic goals and priorities? So through the grant that Center applied for, they're looking to not only build a sustainable mentoring and coaching system, but to fully align it to their school-wide improvement goals, and ultimately that impact and increase student learning. Secondly, we're asking what systems can be put in place to prioritize mentoring and coaching as a model for teacher support in the district. So really wanting to investigate what is it that the district is able to do or change or maneuver to support mentoring and coaching and provide that space for coaches and their mentees to do the work and do it well. So we're continuing to observe that as we see Center growing in their systems, and they're now into the 2nd year of that grant, and it's been really fascinating to watch. Thirdly, how do mentors or coaches work with principals to support educator growth and development, and what boundaries need to be put in place, and how can those be honored? So one of the very first things that came out is from our mentor group was their fear that they were going to be perceived as evaluators anytime that they were in a classroom observing another teacher. That has continued to resurface over and over and over. In almost every cohort, we hear like, "Oh my gosh, I do not want to be seen as an evaluator. I cannot be seen as an evaluator. How can I go in and create that relationship so that it's truly authentic and there's that trust?" And so we're really keeping an eye on how is Center systemically able to address some of those pieces And what is it telling us about the nature of the work between teacher leaders and principals that needs to happen in order to create that kind of systems change? Next, in what ways can mentoring coaching be employed to support experienced or veteran teachers in the district? So we're still curious about those more experienced teachers because we just believe that there's a lot of value in this work for them, and we're continuing to monitor that through the second year and third year of implementation in Center. And finally, how can structured mentoring and coaching be sustained beyond 1 or 2 year grants? So the grants have been amazing because they've given $2,000 stipends to anyone who's serving in a mentoring role. That's significantly higher than districts are currently paying. But once the grant money goes away, the question is, what then? How do we honor the time and commitment that these mentors and coaches are putting in to their work? And what will it take at a district level or a systems level to be able to sustain that work? And that's something that Center is very engaged in right now as well.
And to kind of follow up on that first cohort, they would every other week on Friday spend the entire Friday with Curtis and I. So they're on a 4-day week, and sort of. They have usually at least once a month they have professional development on that week, and this was an extra day that they stayed. So think about that dedication to spend your entire Friday with him.
Us.
Us. And with the second, and now we're on the third year of the grant, they have also continued that spending. Now we do half days, but every month they spend a half day working on their skills with mentoring, and they're developing stuff with us. So, and we know Curtis is wonderful, but so exciting growth from our first core. So we're observing a shift from them focusing on themselves and individuals to a focus on the system. This is a multi-year progression, as I alluded to earlier. When we first start hearing the mentors talk and we're in the training, they talk about practicing these skills or using these skills successfully with their students and their family. They said they're very effective with their significant others. But it takes them a long time, and we can map this as they're developing and as they're practicing before they start really using these skills within their professional lives with other colleagues and with their mentee. So, but we're seeing that, and then was it the first meeting this year that we walked out and we both said, they're not thinking about themselves, they're thinking about the system. They're making changes in the system. And we're like, yes, it's working. It does take a while. We're starting to see evidence of higher retention and resiliency among beginning teachers who are being coached and mentored. With our first cohort, all of the teachers stayed in the teaching profession. And I know you're like, oh, they're veteran teachers. But in today's world, that's a good statistic. In our second cohort, everybody but one teacher, and she's still dabbling in education, but stayed in the classroom, which is good. In our first cohort, all of the mentees, except for one, continued to the second year, and that one wasn't exactly a choice of that mentee. It was an encouraged change in field. Second year, I think we lost 2 mentees in the process. Again, in both of those cases, it was a agreement between the mentee and the school system. So they become a cohort dedicated to supporting teacher growth through intentional planning, structures, and supports. Some of the structures and supports, and you can join in, that they've developed is a calendar that supports new teachers. They've actually been instrumental in adding some, before the school year begins, some support that they have and some time with their mentee They also have very structured or have come up with very structured timelines of when they meet with their mentee. The school has supported them with getting subs, so they have the time. They've also developed a go-to directory of where to go to for all of the help for a new teacher that they need. Excuse me. And my favorite is the 15-page acronym dictionary for the new teacher, of all the different acronyms that the new teacher is going to be exposed to. And those are different than our acronyms. So
Let me add on that just a little bit, because I want to, their goal with this, so this came through in their reflection and conversation. They said, well, it really sucks because we have all this time at the beginning of the year that new teachers come in and they're being trained, but what they're being trained on is really just learning the basics, the logistics of the job. And we lose, there simply is no time left for any of the valuable conversations that can happen around lesson planning, instructional design, coaching, and mentoring. So they started thinking about what are some ways we can try to get rid of all the logistic administrative stuff, or at least set it over here, so that we can make the case that beginning of year PD time should really be about the relationship building and focus on establishing the coaching model. And so that's where these ideas started to come out. And those are tools and resources that they've started developing as a group. And we see that as a systemic change, right? Because that's how you start to shift the system and create some space for better work to happen with brand new teachers at the beginning of the year.
and throughout, they get some time on the professional development days to work specifically with the mentees. So there's a lot of, the system changes has been throughout. They've become positive leaders on campus. They're recognized by the administration and their peers as leaders. They're now invited to the conversations. They're part of the standard superintendent's meeting. They're now a line item on the superintendent's meeting. So they're making a difference.
Okay, last slide, then we'll open it up for some questions and discussion. So just summarizing here some of the things that we've shared with you all, and we're happy to hear questions. But there is evidence of growing self-efficacy that we're starting to detect, growing leadership and perceptions of teachers' own effectiveness. And we've seen that now in each cohort that's come through. The teachers, through their own self-reflection, have increased awareness of areas in which they want to grow and develop. So it's suggesting that the work that mentors and coaches are doing are not just benefiting the people that they're mentoring and coaching. There's a benefit that's coming back to them in terms of their own reflection on their practice. Many of the mentors referred to renewed energy in teaching. We think that's super important for understanding strategies for retention. And all of the first cohort is still teaching, so there's just some evidence for that, and most of the second cohort is. The interest in our program has grown because previous cohorts have started to encourage their peers, and this is a nice problem to have, but we're trying to figure out what can we do to sustain and grow this program. We're now getting inquiries from all across the state even to say, I want to get some better training in mentoring and coaching, how can I join? So that's something that's TBD, but it's been a really neat outcome of this work. And finally, we're starting to see a renewed excitement, at least in Center, through this ongoing multi-year work in what they've dubbed the Center Way. So that's the sense of culture that they've tried to create that embeds mentoring and coaching as something that every teacher there can simply expect and rely upon as a form of support for their growth. And we just think that's so exciting to watch and be a part of. And generally, the teachers there are energized and feel a sense of belonging. So we're starting to see them get more engaged and involved in district level work, and we think that's in part due to some of their experiences that they've had in the mentoring and coaching. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we'll go ahead and open it up now to your questions or comments.
Yes, Marty?
Do the mentors select their own mentees, or are the mentees assigned to the mentors?
Good question. A little bit of both, sort of. And it works differently in every district. The conversation goes through the principals and the superintendent at center, generally. The Monte Vista has a whole nother system where they rotate mentors, so they don't stay with the same mentee all year. And Alamosa seems to kind of go through the principal. So, but it's, I don't, what happened at your school?
It went through a principal as
Okay,
well.
yeah.
He tried to match up mentors and mentees that were, compatible, if you will. So yeah, ours was principal driven.
There's also certain times where a mentor is required. So we require a mentor, for any student who's being in a school and observing in a classroom. That requirement has opened up the possibilities for that mentor to be a part of our program. Any new teacher in Colorado is required to go through what's called an induction program, which is where they undergo a full year of additional support, and that also requires a mentor. So we've been able to get some folks in that way. And then there's a growing number of alternative licensed teachers now in the field. They also require mentors. And so a number of our folks have been mentors of alternative candidates.
And the participants in your program, do they serve as mentors from the very beginning? Or do you give them 4 weeks of training in how to be an effective mentor before they begin mentoring?
They start from the very beginning. It's an on-the-job training.
But a part of our seminar design is to work with them on what are those beginning steps
Yeah.
to set up the relationship. So we do trust and rapport building exercises. And the very first conversation they have to document and engage their mentee in is what are our values, what are our goals, and how can we build and sustain trust in this relationship. So we're there to provide structures and supports and how that should work. And then just the realities are sometimes they haven't quite identified somebody to mentor yet at that time in the year. So we're constantly maneuvering and just working around those things. But
Yeah. And there is mentoring going on in the school without us happening. I mean, it is something that has been going on in schools forever with the induction program, with the alternative certified. So an alt certificate person enters a classroom without their teaching license day one, but they're required to have a mentor in the school to work with them. Kind of an apprenticeship model, but they have the classroom to themselves. So these things have been going on always, but we're trying to get trained mentors out there now.
Is there any way you can compare the effectiveness of your program to the mentors who are not a part of your program?
that's a great
Probably.
question.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, yeah, I suppose we could track things like the retention rates of new teachers and whether or not they're supported by a trained mentor or a non-trained mentor. And we're part of a statewide group who's doing this work, and there's an interest in collecting some statewide data, which is going to be even better because you're going to get some, larger N sizes. But that's a great question that I think we
Yeah.
can take to that group.
That's a good.
It seems like you've got 2 goals. One is teacher retention,
Mm-hmm.
but there ought to be the second goal should be student learning. And is that, can you see any differences there?
We haven't specifically looked at that.
Maybe too early too.
Yeah.
I think through Center's work, since part of their work as it's evolved has been to align the mentoring and coaching to their district strategic goals. And those strategic goals are all geared towards
Students.
specific increases in student performance that they're seeing. So we might be able to, over some time, track that.
Yeah, it's probably too soon yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In what courses in our teacher ed program here do we incorporate learning about these strategies and these methods that mentor strategies and methods?
So it definitely lives in the mentor endorsement program that we created. It's not always present, so it's really not present in the courses that our teacher licensure candidates complete. There's a little bit around mentoring and coaching and our principal program and leadership and how to be an effective instructional leader, but it's really not at the depth. And that's another thing we've always heard the group say is, oh my gosh, my principal needs this. I wish they could have this training. What can we do to make that happen?
Yeah.
So we're definitely thinking about how can we embed more of that, because the skill set is just so impactful for anyone who's in a role like that, right? And for instructional
It's
leadership.
also a little bit embedded in our some of our programs for the CNI and CNI STEM in the PLC course.
Benefit pre-service teachers and
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and it fits well with the PLC because they're often working with pre-service teachers in their PLC. So I do a module on it, but not at this level of intensity.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Oh, sorry. Thank you for the comment about the administrators, because I'm wondering if you've noticed a difference in the outcomes or the way that mentors are carrying this new experience based on the school they're in with a certain administrative, role or type. Knowing that Center has recently changed administration at the building level, not, at the top, but has that had any impact on these findings?
My observation has been that the relationships and foundation that the cohort has been able to build as a group that preceded any transition in leadership has helped to sustain that work, because it lives there. It wasn't an administrator who came in and said, we're doing this and this is where we're going to move forward.
It's been a
These are teachers
grassroots.
leading the way. And the two that have been doing it, I think, were very intentional when the transition occurred to say, hey, we've got this work underway, we've got a grant, so you're going to kind of support us and jump on board. So I haven't seen any takeaway from that. But we do know that leadership matters, right? And that any schools could be under a leader that would say, oh yeah, this is trash. We're going to go back to something else, but hopefully.
There's very definite support from the superintendent, and now with the change of leadership, one of the assistant principals is actually one of our first cohort.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So, and then one of the instructional coaches, was a teacher but moved into an instructional coaching position. Actually, two of the instructional coaches at the elementary are mentors. So we are seeing, there is some of that leadership from the training being inside the leadership at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I was intrigued. So your description had one of the remarks that the strength of this is really only realizable after about a year, and so you're doing pre and post testing, but you're not necessarily capturing the middle. And I'm curious if you noticed that there was maybe like a slump in the sense of like you're doing all this training and people are working hard, and they're maybe in the short term not seeing the investments, and then it kind of improves at the end if you're noticing that sort of like really long trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel? You went through it, the training, just to put you on the spot.
I think that there was for me, there was a progression the whole way through. It wasn't all at the end. It was just all the way through growth and progression and learning, and it was all the way through for me, if that helps.
it seems like the qualitative, the excerpts that you had, the comments kind of revealed that, that they were like revelations that they had all the way through that had helped their personal relationships. And I don't know, I think I kind of saw that even in some of the
Now, You also got some other data that we didn't show. We have 100% of completing the program both years. The other programs in the state don't, when we were looking at their data. Not to say we're better. We do have Curtis, but so we are better. But anything. I mean, I've started several of these grants when I was a teacher. These types of things when universities have come in and said join us, and oftentimes they fizzle by second semester. You know, they're just not. The motivation just isn't there, and we have 100% attending all the way through.
One reason for that, I think, is also, as we heard from other programs, they're not going as deep or intensive as we are. So they're doing things like 1 hour meetings, you know, every week or two with their mentor groups. We were doing full days, and now we're doing full evenings regularly, either virtually or together. And at first we were nervous about, is that going to scare people away from the program?
Because it's a time commitment.
It's a huge time commitment. But every year, without fail, we've heard like, oh, I was so afraid this was going to be a drain on me and I just wasn't going to be able to balance it. But I look forward to going to that seminar every time it happens. It has been so valuable for me. And I think that has a lot to do with the success and retention, because our cohorts build really strong, powerful relationships with each other, right?
And last year we started with our second cohort, since they were all over. We're like, oh, we're going to have to do this virtually. There's no way they're going to drive to Adams for this. And so we started, I guess we did synchronous every other week, almost all of first semester.
On Zoom, yeah.
On Zoom. So synchronous on Zoom. And then we did the last 2 meetings of the first semester in person. And everybody said, we want all of them in person. So we switched to the once a month in person here on campus, and once a month the synchronous. And this year we have that schedule. And again, we're hearing, why don't we just do them all? And we're talking people driving from the schools all over. And that's pretty dedication when their class is 5 to 8 this year, Tuesday night. We've had 100% attendance on our in-person classes. So they've taught all day. They rush to us. We let them get dinner and eat during class. And they're here till 8. That's that's major dedication. But I think they're building also that trust among themselves, and it's a fun class.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody falls asleep. Well, yeah. Yes.
To what extent did the stipend play in your success?
I think the stipend helps them sign up. I don't think it keeps them going to class. I mean, they get $1,000 at the end of the first semester. Most of, not the entire tuition, but most of their tuition is paid through the grant. And then $1,000 at the end of the second semester. But I don't know. I don't know if I would, if it wasn't good and worthwhile, I don't know if I could do the 3 hours at night class, for even $1,000.
The stipend was a motivator, but it was the whole experience and the knowledge gained was worth so much more than what the stipend was. I was just like a bonus. Yeah.
So perhaps you could continue this beyond the grant then, without.
Hopefully.
Well, so money does come into play, because the work that's involved is additional for these folks. And one interesting thing that happened was all of our first group went through and completed the program, and because they did that, they were all eligible to add an endorsement to their teaching license. But none of them did. We had to follow up with them a year later and say, or several months later, and say, hey, who's actually gone through and added this endorsement to their license? And like, oh, I didn't think about that. And I think one of the reasons for that is because a question in their mind is, oh, if I continue to do this work at this level, how is my time going to be honored? And that's a question Center is really addressing right now, is what is it going to take from the district beyond their grant to really sustain and embed that work. Because it is a lot of time and energy that these folks are putting in, and they can't be asked to just do it for free. So there is, I think that's a good question, because the grant has helped with that initial stage, but there's going to be more resources that are required to sustain it.
'Cause you know, sustainability of a program like this is pretty critical.
Yeah.
The
You can't
state,
give grants continually, but
No.
there's got to be some other mechanism.
So there's advocacy now at the state level, and the group we're a part of is actually helping to do some of this work to get the legislature to start to factor in additional funds and resources specifically for mentoring and coaching, because they're starting to recognize the benefits and values, and that school districts can't just be expected to figure it out on their own. So we'll be testifying to the legislature eventually, I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah. So in the near future, I think we'll still get the year grants to support our program. Hopefully. Sounds like it. It does limit our size, though. Last year we were limited to 15, but we had a 16th teacher who just said, I really want to do it. And she paid for it herself. We were actually able to get her funding that the state had over. When we mentioned that at the state level, they're like, oh, we have a little bit we can contribute. But she chose to go ahead and do it without the funding. Unfortunately, she did get the funding, but.
You know, motivation like that is pretty critical to keep.
Yeah. The science teacher, you know, they're.
Well, again, we want to thank you all so much for joining
Yes,
us this
thank
evening
you.
and hearing about our work and your wonderful questions. Thank you.